One of the greatest figures in 20th century music has died. That's Notation, an early work by Pierre Boulez, the French composer and conductor. His death was announced today at the age of 90. As a composer, particularly as a young composer, he quickly established himself as a firebrand, moving music, as he put it, out of the world of Newton and into the world of Einstein. As a conductor, his reputation was as a precise and demanding leader, committed to championing contemporary music with orchestras and audiences. We brought together a fellow conductor, Sir Neville Marriner, and a singer who collaborated with Boulez on many performances, as well as recording one which won a Grammy Award. She's Hilary Summers. She told me about her first audition with Pierre Boulez.
The initial reaction was obviously terror, because this was a man that I'd had lectures about at university, that this was a man whose books and treatises I'd been forced to read. And so when the opportunity came up, they were looking for a singer to sing his masterpiece, Le Marteau sans Maître, which is actually perfect for my sort of voice. It's a low contralto with a couple of high things thrown in. I thought, yes, I've got to do it. But oh no, it's for Pierre Boulez. How horrendous, how embarrassing to have to audition for him with his music. Happily, the outcome was that he liked me and booked me, and
it must have been terrifying, dare I say it, at the start, because I mean, the music is difficult, and he had a reputation for being or having a very exacting ear, didn't he?
Well, absolutely, and when always hears horror stories about composers, and they invariably turn out to not be remotely true. Or I've luckily had that experience. But of course, you want to get it right. And I've always wanted to get things right. It's not good enough to just approximate. So very complicated music. I learnt my role. I could sing my role. Of course, when it came to putting my role with the rest of the ensemble, that's kind of where a lot more work had to go into it. It's one thing being able to sing your solo line without anything else conflicting you and taking you off intonation-wise. And then it's quite another thing, to be put in that scenario with immaculate, amazing players who have all performed the work several times before and know it backwards, and you're the sort of dunce in the middle, effing and blinding because you're getting things wrong in front of Pierre Boulez. I mean, it was just stress city. It was, really initially.
Sir Neville, what did you know of Pierre Boulez, and when did you first come across him?
Well, it's not such an intimate relationship as Hilary's by any means. He's almost an exact contemporary of mine. And really, I've been sort of apart from him for all these years, just in admiration, really. Because in the 1950s, as a youngish composer, he sort of rebelled, I suppose, so convincingly against the sort of conservative Stravinsky and Schoenberg. But it was very much different for me when I met him and he was interpreting music. Then he was so fastidious with his observation of other composers' intentions. So he was a changed personality as a performer, I thought. He was one of the few composers that knew how to deal with orchestral musicians and was utterly reliable as an interpreter.
Hilary, I have to ask you, and I always wheel out this question whenever I'm doing something on this programme about 20th century music.
Oh, go on then.
Well, which is that it can be difficult and it can put up barriers to an audience. I confess, a few months ago I was at the Wigmore Hall, just down the road from here, listening to Jean-Eflamme Bavouzet, the French pianist, play Boulez. I was slightly concerned before we started, and I was blown away by it, partly because it was live and I was a couple of rows back, and I was able to be more involved. But I think I, like a lot of people, will admit also that Boulez is not something that you necessarily sort of immediately turn to when you're thinking, what CD will I play?
I would agree with that. I mean, I would agree with that generally about modern contemporary music. But I do think and I was saying this to somebody earlier, that if you wanted to start listening to Boulez, don't necessarily go to the CD, because I think it's a very live thing. If you watch Boulez being done live, you see the concentration, you see the effort, you see the nuance. You don't just hear it. It is a very corporal thing. I think everybody sort of physicalizes when they have to work that hard. But also, I mean, people that do this sort of music know it and get into it and understand it, and that in itself brings a clarity and an understanding, I think, to an audience. I don't think anybody on a first hearing of anything complicated is going to say, oh, you know, they might think, what the heck was that? I need to listen further into that. But I think you can say that about, you know, songs by Brahms or Schubert as well. I don't think it's just a different way of listening to things.
Sir Neville, did you ever conduct Boulez?
No. In fact, I am by no means the right person to talk to about contemporary music, because I very rarely got there.
But you did conduct 20th century music.
I did conduct
sure, I've got some of your CDs.
Indeed. But strangely enough, I've conducted not one piece of music by Boulez, but I certainly profited from his experience with orchestras, because he made them so much more comfortable with contemporary music. Certainly, he took away a lot of the fear of contemporary music from the players in the orchestra.
Can I ask whether it was a deliberate decision not to conduct Boulez?
No, not at all. It's my life has gone in a completely different direction, and you're very much in the hands of the concert promoters, the people who invite you to play nowadays. And unless it's their passion to have Boulez in the program, you don't get an invitation to play it.
Just finally, can I ask you both if there is a sort of a lesson or a lasting mark that you think Pierre Boulez will have given serious music? What will it be? Hilary?
I think his huge legacy of recordings is going to be everlasting. I think the works that he wrote, his pieces, will hopefully continue to be performed well and up to the standard that he wanted them to be performed. He really made a big deal about working with students and the younger generation to encourage them. And the fact that he has done that means that there will be further generations that worked with him and understood him and will hopefully carry on his things into the future.
Sir Neville?
I think the most significant thing for me is this great loss to our profession, suddenly, of someone who had such an extraordinary effect on our performances of contemporary music.
Yeah.
That was Sir Neville Marriner. You also heard from Hilary Summers, both of them paying tribute to Pierre Boulez, whose death was announced today at the age of 90.